to the What Really Happened radio show. The history the government hopes you never learn. Here is your host, Michael Rivero.
And aloha, America. Welcome to our show. It is Tuesday, April 19th, 2016, Patriots Day. We've got a lot of stuff to talk about. The phone lines are open, 877-300-7645. And Tom is in our control room, ready to answer the phone when you call on in. Our third hour guests today will be Daniel McGowan and Eileen Flemings. These are two of the people behind the billboard calling for recognition and support of the USS Liberty that was taken down under pressure from Israel's supporters, who feel that telling the true, accurate, factual history of Israel represents Jew hatred, or some such nonsense as that. All right, as I mentioned before, this is Patriots Day. Why is it Patriots Day? Well, because on this day, in 1775, in Lexington and Concord, the American people began the process of kicking out the last bunch of tax-happy fools who refused to listen to the people, hence the name Patriots Day. Now, April 19th is also the anniversary of some other less pleasant aspects. And, of course, on this date in 1993, the Federal Bureau of Investigation gassed a church full of women and children to death with a poison gas that is illegal to use on enemy troops in time of war, down in Waco, Texas. Now, the reason this was done was to cover up a major botch-up by the BATF, which, shortly after being chartered with enforcement powers, had a string of nightmare public relations disasters, kicking down the wrong door, killing innocent people, and Congress was already starting to talk about revoking their enforcement powers, and so the BATF wanted a big spectacular success that they could put in the media to say, see, we're out here doing some good. So they decided they were going to raid this church, this commune, the Branch Davidians, and this is in Texas. Guns are very common, and the Branch Davidians funded their little religious commune by buying and selling and repairing guns. And a lot of people say, what is church doing with guns? Well, prior to David Koresh, the previous leader, had been running a meth lab on the property. So going from meth to gun repair, I think, was a positive direction for them to be going. But the BATF decided they were going to get some headlines by raiding this church and parading all these guns being seized on the media, even though all the guns owned by the Branch Davidians were legally owned. They were all legal weapons, legally owned. The BATF was trying to claim, they had fully automatic weapons, they had a nuclear bomb, they had a Death Star. But on the day of the raid, all of the Branch Davidians' working guns were absent from the church. They were at a gun show, because that's what they were doing. And all that was left were guns waiting repairs or being stripped for parts. And after the fire was all over, all of those guns were still in the storage room, with all the ashes and everything still falling on them. Now, Branch Davidian leader David Koresh was tipped off to this coming raid by one of the reporters the BATF had invited along to get maximum media coverage. And David Koresh opened the front door of the church. He was going to let the BATF in to inspect the weapons and verify that, first of all, they weren't working, and second of all, that they were all legal weapons. And somebody, we don't know who, shot David Koresh in the groin. And that's what escalated the standoff. Now, some interesting facts about the Waco situation. 4 former Clinton bodyguards, Stephen Willis, Robert Williams, Conway LeBlanc, and Todd McKeon, had all been transferred to the BATF just before the raid. And according to the autopsy, they all died of identical gunshots to their left temples at close range. Paul Wilker, an attorney who was investigating Waco, was found dead on June 22nd, 1993. Carlos Gigliotti, a thermal imaging expert hired by the House Government Reform Committee to review tapes of the siege at Waco, Texas, claiming that he saw incendiary devices in use by the FBI, was found dead on April 28, 2000. A lot of wet work going on. Now, of course, if you believe the Vice President, Joe Biden, there was no improper motive by the federal government at Waco, Texas. The Davidians committed suicide. Yes, they gassed themselves with that poison gas that is illegal to use in time of war. Anytime the government wants to kill somebody, they're depressed, they committed suicide. Vince Foster, very, very depressed. Also on this day was the Oklahoma City bombing in 1995. The building was destroyed by a massive bomb blast. It was blamed on a truck bomb, but military explosives experts looked at the damage and said there had to be cutter charges as well. I mean, there are huge holes in the story about, Tim McVeigh was out of position. There was a second Ryder truck discovered in a military compound nearby, was spotted by a pilot who took some pictures. And there were obviously explosive charges. The media was reporting additional bombs had been found inside the building. Now, the bombing was very convenient for the government for two reasons. First of all, they were starting this big push for the domestic anti-terror agenda, more police powers, less civil protections, less privacy, more spying. And the second reason was because Congress, under public pressure, was going to hold hearings on what happened at Waco. And the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms had assembled all of their documentation of that event in the Murrah Building, Oklahoma City, where it was destroyed by the bombing, effectively ending the congressional inquiry. How very, very lucky for our boys over in the BATF. All right, let's get up to current events. As you know, they're having the primary over in New York City, and already it is an absolute mess. We are getting reports from all over of serious problems. The New York Daily News is reporting broken machines, closed polling places. One Facebook post said that nobody could find the key to open up the polling place. The doors are locked. Nobody's got the key. Apparently, over in Queens, early morning voters arrived to find broken machines and belated polling. And Springfield Gardens showed up at 6 a.m. He and about 50 other early voters learned all three machines on site were broken. And the people running the election just said, put your ballots in a box and we'll process them later on. Meaning the votes for Hillary will be sent on and the votes for Bernie Sanders will go into the shredder. So it's already out there. The New York Attorney General's office has set up a hotline for election fraud, which they'll probably ignore. Another story out of whowhatwhy.org. New York voters face obstacles and irregularities. And they're talking about the situation in which thousands and thousands of New York voters are arriving to vote, discovering that their party affiliation has magically changed, and they can't vote in the primary for the party they thought they were registered in, and there's no way to correct the situation. So if you're going into the ballot to vote for Donald Trump and you get handed a libertarian ballot, that's it. You're not going to be, you're out of luck. You can't vote for the guy you want to vote for. Now, New Yorkers have already filed a lawsuit over this matter, calling it a threat to the democratic process. Yeah, it is. Donald Trump had a comment. They were trying to make fun of it on Fox News about, buying delegates isn't democracy. And it's, Trump is just, he knows the rules that we made up to steal this election. Why is he whining and whining and whining? Well, he's whining because he's winning all these popular votes. He's got tremendous grassroots support, and they keep stealing his delegates away. They did it in Colorado. They did it in Wyoming. Apparently, Cruz is trying to pirate Trump's delegates up in Michigan. It's absurd. The American people are really coming to realize our elections are crooked. They're absolutely fraudulent. It's just a theater pageant to trick us into thinking that we have some control over the government and that in some roundabout way we voted for higher taxes, more war, and a decaying infrastructure. We'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. And over at WhatReallyHappened.com, we've been posting some stories reminding everybody that this election fraud problem is nothing new. It's been going on all along. It's been skyrocketing ever since the federal government mandated the switch over to these electronic machines. And everybody knows there's a problem and nothing is being done because the people ordering us to use those machines are the ones who benefit from them. So we have this video from West Virginia that's actually documenting votes flipping on the electronic voting machine. And they're trying to say it's just a calibration problem. It's just a calibration problem. No, with modern, displays and touch, you don't have calibration problems. These are machines that get used for one day every 2 years. Now, how many times have you used your iPhone or your tablet and had a calibration problem? They did in the early days. Okay, but not anymore. That's a known technology. And, of course, a reminder that there was some concern earlier over the flyer, an election mailing that went on out that seemed to imply that the primary election was actually in September. And that never got, and that was actually a replacement for another mailer that was full of errors. We have a flashback video from Fox News from 2008 where they're demonstrating how the Diebold electronic vote machines can be rigged. Everybody knows this is a problem, but nobody wants to do anything about it. And again, I absolutely do not accept that the nation that put men on the moon cannot come up with an accurate, honest, verifiable, reliable election system. If it's this crooked, it is intentional. We're going to grab some phone calls here. Dustin in New Jersey, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Yeah, hi, Mike. Yeah, George Carlin said it all, man. You have the illusion of democracy. You have no election. It's a C election. If people can't, you got to be living under a rock if you can't figure out what's going on now. I mean, it's just plain and simple. You have to be either living under a rock or you're too busy watching reality TV shows and bread and circuses or whatever. This is all an illusion. They're not going to let Donald Trump in. They're setting up firewalls. I mean, it's a spectacle, man. I mean,
yep.
And then there are cohorts in Europe. They own all the newspapers. Hollande, Merkel, all of them came out against Trump. It's one group of oligarchs. They control the banks. They're not going to let Donald Trump in. Period.
Well, I keep thinking about that statement from John F. Kennedy, those who make peaceful revolution impossible make violent revolution inevitable. I'd hate to see that, but it does seem to be the direction we're headed at this point.
Yeah, it's sad, Mike. I mean, I don't know. I get so mad. I'm like,
good. It's time to get mad. It's time to let yourself be angry over what is being done to your nation.
It's just like there's still a bunch of people that are asleep. It's like, what's more important, your country or the crap on TV or watching some sports?
No, I'm not seeing that out here. I'm seeing, I wear my Hillary for Prison T-shirt. People are now openly laughing, and everywhere I go, I haven't met anybody, I think, in months who thinks we've got a working, functioning democracy here. Everybody understands these elections are rigged. Certainly the stuff that was happening out here when we had our primary here in Hawaii, and everybody was talking about that all, things were missing, ballots were, it was a horrible, horrible mess. Anyway, listen, I'm going to let you go. We're going to switch over here to Jimmy in Missouri. Aloha, welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hello, Mike. How you doing?
Doing fine.
Listen, on yesterday, you mentioned that the $1,000 was abhorrent to the Second Amendment because it should not be infringed. Second Amendment. I think more deeply. Is that correct?
Okay, we have a really, really bad phone connection, and I think you're talking about the story we did yesterday, where there is a proposal to put a $1,000 tax on all firearms purchases. And obviously, this is a mechanism so that the rich are able to keep and bear arms, but the poor will be refrained from it. Now, as far as I'm concerned, that's a violation of the Second Amendment, which says the right to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. And obviously, a tax is an infringement.
Okay, I understand that. What I was going back to was the fact that it was an inalienable right to bear arms, and being inalienable would mean the fact that you could not set a lien against it, which means you could not regulate it or cause someone to pay money for your use of that inalienable right. And then that was in fact what inalienable meant. But granted that I can see what you're saying totally what you mean by infringed.
Okay.
And secondly, you were trying to redefine or put down the definition of terrorism on yesterday. And I went to a military college over 30 years ago, and I was an Air Force ROTC. And one of the things we learned at that time that there was actually 4 types of warfare, not biological, chemical, nuclear, but as far as a legitimate warfare, whether it be total warfare, limited warfare, covert warfare. But the 4th type of warfare taught then was terrorism. Terrorism was considered by the military establishment as a legitimate form of combat, and what a terrorist was a person was someone who had all the attributes of a nation, which meant national power, such as an army, national policy, which the PLO had, and a constituency, which were members of the PLO. Those 3 things are necessary to be considered a nation. But a terrorist is a nation that does not actually have a land, does not have something that you can conquer or necessarily bomb.
Okay, I'm going to have to interrupt you here because we're almost to the commercial break. The USA Patriot Act changed the legal definition of terrorism down to include individuals who used violence or the threat of violence to coerce a change in the victim's political views. But still in all, terrorist and terrorism is being loosely flung about our society, where you've got Bill Nye that is saying anybody who doubts human-caused global warming is a potential terrorist and ought to be treated like one. And it's this reckless application of the word, and they do it in order to justify bypassing your civil protections and the Bill of Rights in their attempts to silence you.
Touché. You got me. Okay, I just wanted, it's a whole hijacking of our vocabulary, and I thought it was very important to remember that at one time it was considered a legitimate military foe.
Oh, it may still be considered a legitimate form of combat, but the definition has been widened in order to use it as a political hammer for domestic policy. All right, Jimmy, thank you very much for the phone call. We're going to let you go. Apparently over in Denver, Colorado, there are major protests regarding the way the state GOP just handed all of their delegates to Ted Cruz. The people of Colorado they're marching through what's left of that snow, and they are very, very angry. We'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here. Now, not too long ago, Hillary Clinton was sailing high in the polls. She was ahead of Bernie Sanders by 60 points in the national polls. Right now, it is a dead heat. They are matching. Now, eve of the New York polls, they're reporting that Donald Trump was ahead of Ted Cruz and John Kasich by 30 points. They're reporting that Hillary Clinton is ahead of Sanders by 12 points. That is suspicious, because Sanders has been leading Clinton 4 weeks, and then all of a sudden, there's a week without any polling numbers, and they come up with this poll that Clinton has soared into the lead. Now remember, if they're going to steal the elections, they have to rig the polls as well, because everybody is on the alert for election fraud. The American people are suspicious now that this is not all on the up and up. And a sudden dramatic change in the polls like that, I don't think so. I smell a big rat on this one. All right, story coming out of the Daily Mail. Clinton Foundation caught in the Panama Papers scandal. And it is coming out that Bill and Hillary Clinton have multiple connections with people who were using that law firm, Mossack Fonseca, to set up offshore entities for the purpose of concealing wealth and evading taxes. Now, among these are Gabrielle Fialkoff, finance director for Hillary Clinton's first campaign for the Senate, Frank Giustra, a Canadian mining magnate who has traveled the globe with Bill Clinton, the Shiguri family, which pledged $1 billion in projects to the Clinton Global Initiative, and Chinese billionaire Ng Lap Seng, who was at the heart of that Chinagate scandal we were telling you about yesterday. Also, billionaire investor Mark Rich was using these tax havens, and he was an international fugitive until Bill Clinton pardoned him in the final hours of his presidency. And Hillary's out there condemning this outrageous use of tax havens and how we cannot stand it, and all her friends are doing it. She's out there trying to act like she's on the side of ordinary people when it comes to tax avoidance, and all of her friends are doing it. I loved it when Hillary Clinton was trying to convince everybody that she and Bill Clinton were just poor people. When they left the White House, they had nothing. That's absolute, complete, and utter nonsense. Hillary was going around saying, you know, honest, we're poor. I'm poor. Bill is poor. Chelsea's poor. The upstairs maid is poor. The chauffeur is poor. My lawyer is poor. My personal secretary is poor. The cook is poor. We're all poor, 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 poor. Now, Ted Cruz actually took out an ad in New York in Yiddish to tell Jewish people in New York that he is God's chosen candidate to be president of the United States of America. Okay, well, if that's true, Ted, why did God have you born up in Canada? Now, speaking of Ted Cruz citizenship, as it turns out, this is over at the Still Report, that judge in New Jersey who declared Ted Cruz could stay on the New Jersey ballot because I really don't know what natural born means, you know. And apparently he didn't even review any of the information presented in the case. He didn't even look at it. Just, I've made up my mind. He can be on the ballot. It's amazing. Now, the law professor candidate, Victor Williams, has filed an emergency petition with New Jersey Governor Chris Christie, saying that Ted Cruz cannot be allowed on the ballot. He is not a natural-born U.S. citizen. So that's the next step going forward. It is a crooked election. Nobody wants to play by the Constitution in government. It's just a blankety-blank piece of paper. We just put up a story a little while earlier. As it turns out, Hillary Clinton was ineligible to be Secretary of State because of a provision in the Constitution called the Emoluments Clause, which says that if you're in Congress, when you leave Congress, you may not enter into any other official capacity whose rate of pay was changed while you were holding your term. And it's a complex issue, but it's another example of how Hillary and her enablers, they don't want to be burdened by the Constitution. They want to get rid of it. That's why Common Core is teaching our kids now that the founding fathers of this country were a bunch of terrorists and they were wrong for defying the authority of the British Crown. And, you know, they were all slave owners and drunkards. And, you know, it's time to get rid of that Constitution and replace it with a much simpler foundation of our society. You will do what we tell you to do. Now, one of the reasons the people in Colorado are upset, it's turned out, you know, Colorado actually did try and change their system to have a primary. And they did it in May of 2015. But 4 Colorado Senate Republicans killed the initiative. And it turns out they're all Ted Cruz delegates now. They were planning this hijacking of the election system long ago. Now, this story over in Blacklisted News, it's called Hillary Cruising to the White House, and it's making the same prediction that I am. That once Hillary steals her nomination and Ted Cruz steals his, Hillary's lawyers will go right to the Supreme Court over that natural-born issue, and the Supreme Court will say Ted Cruz is ineligible, and Hillary will have a lock on the November election. It's a setup. Now, speaking of elections, we're getting the results from the elections they held in Syria, and the ruling Ba'ath Party enjoyed a sizable majority. And, of course, the U.S. government is out there saying, no, you can't do that. You know, we're going to give you a new government. You're not supposed to vote yourself a government. We only support democracy when you vote for our people here. Meanwhile, the Syrian opposition, meaning the people supported by the U.S. government, has ended the peace talks and launched a new offensive in northwest Syria. They're still trying to grab that. Now, as you know, the other day, Benjamin Netanyahu irked quite a few people, including Syria, by declaring that the Golan Heights has been part of Israel since antiquity. It's a bald-faced lie. And the United States has issued their official position, along with Germany and the United Nations. No, the Golan Heights is not a part of Israel. It is occupied Syrian territory. Now, the U.S. isn't really all that concerned about Israel or Syria or legality or any of that. What's going on here is a fight over who's going to control that oil they just found under the Golan. If Israel grabs the land, they're going to sell that oil at a very high price. If the U.S. inserts a puppet regime in Syria, then they can arrange for that Golan oil to come to U.S. refineries at a much reduced rate. That's what this is really going to be about. And it's causing a lot of friction. Joe Biden actually came out and said Netanyahu is moving Israel, and by extension the United States, in the wrong direction. And it's another reminder, Israel's iron-fisted grip over U.S. politics is beginning to slip. Now, we're getting a little more information about this recent interaction between the USS Donald Cook and Russian warplanes. It came out a few days ago that the Donald Cook had sort of strayed into Russian territorial waters. Now we're finding out that Donald Cook was actually simulating attacks on Russian territory, and that's why the aircraft came out to take a look. It wasn't aggression on Russia's part, it was aggression simulated on the part of the Donald Cook. We'll be right back. Aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here, and we're going to go ahead and grab ourselves a quick phone call from Reese in London. Aloha, welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Aloha, Mike. I just thought I understand that you've got a wide audience, and I've been watching your website and listening to your broadcasts over the years from time to time. And obviously you reached the UK, and you may know that we have a battle royale that's taking place in June, and it's to do with the EU and whether we should remain in or out. And the campaign for out of the EU is Brexit. Unfortunately, the politicians seem to miss one thing that would really silence the argument, and I would propose that most people who are on the fence and most people who think, well, Jobs, yeah, well, I like this guy's character, I like his personality, will say, heck no, hell no, never. And it's this. This vote is over one thing and one thing only. It's about free speech, free thought, and that's the hallmark of democracy. Otherwise, why have a vote? And why throw it away and say we don't need a vote if you fought for it all your life and established your own European Union, which is the United Kingdom. England, Scotland, Northern Ireland, and Wales. It's the United Kingdom. It's the European Union in of itself. But I was listening to a radio station in England. We have micro stations as well that the government sponsors. And obviously they put their own propaganda on. And there was an MP from the Green Party who was on, and I got on to make a call. And I asked her, I said, well, you know, it's about freedom of speech. You won't get freedom of speech in the EU. She said, oh, yeah, the Convention of Human Rights, yeah. So I'd like to read that for you.
Well, we're running a little short on time here. My response to that is anybody who thinks there's freedom of speech in the EU just needs to look at how France is coming down on anybody critical of Israel. Freedom of speech is the advertising, it's not the reality. There's another more compelling reason for the British to vote to leave the European Union, and that's purely financial. Brussels is just sucking huge amounts of money out of Great Britain, and all that Britain is getting back in return are a bunch of nitpicking laws and interference in their life. And I know that a big issue for the Remain campaign is the claim that leaving the European Union will cost the average British household something like £4,000. But if Britain stays linked to the European Union and goes the way that Greece did, £4,000 is going to look like a real bargain. So you may want to grab that now. That's assuming the claim is accurate, and there's no reason to think it is. These are, after all, politicians.
It certainly isn't accurate. We've seen what they call the pig. That's Portugal, Italy, Greece, and Spain go down, and Ireland as well. And your economy is being tanked. But I would argue. I mean, I've got the leaflets where the government, David Cameron says, oh, we're not going to use taxpayers' money to advertise, and he's gone around and used £9 million to put out a bloody leaflet, and it's full of lies. Well, we've also got the other side who put out a smaller leaflet, but it's factual. At least it's factual and it gives you a balanced argument. Ultimately, money means nothing because it's not money, it's all fiat. We know that. So what does the human being need? He needs his freedom of speech. And my point is, it's Article 10 of the European Convention of Human Rights. Now, not many people realize that Eleanor Roosevelt, she was the one who backed the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. And if you read Article 19, it gives you complete and utter freedom of speech on any medium, anywhere, wherever you want it. But the EU tweaked it. And it's in point 2, when it says the exercise of these freedoms, since it carries with it duties and responsibilities, may be subject to such formalities, conditions, restrictions, or penalties. And you spoke about what happens in France. One of the websites I've checked over the years.
Well, just to simplify it, basically what the EU is saying is you have freedom of speech as long as you're only saying things that we like.
Exactly.
All right.
And freedom of speech with conditions is not freedom of speech.
It's permitted
and
speech.
Got to vote out.
Okay.
Can I just say one thing before I go, Mike?
Real quick, because we're running out of time.
Yeah. Anybody in the UK who think that I am joking, if you like your freedom of speech and you want to complain and you want to write letters, you've got to vote out. I'll leave it there.
All right. Well, thank you very much. We're going to let you go. And obviously, I'm fully in favor of the Brexit, the Drexit, the Grexit, the Frexit. These large globe-spanning empires are not for the benefit of the nations and the people in them. It's just another way of piling up the money higher and more power concentrated, and that's always a bad thing. Now then, talking about the economy. As you know, Deutsche Bank has admitted as part of a settlement here in the United States of America that, yes, indeed, they were rigging gold and silver prices. And they paid a settlement to the U.S. government, which represents a tiny fraction of what they made from the rigging going on all these years. And they may not be out of hot water yet because apparently Canada is getting ready to sue. And frankly, I think anybody on the planet, any bank, any individual, any nation that has been investing in physical silver and physical gold has cause to take Deutsche Bank and all the other participants to court right now and nationalize them. It was a criminal act. Nobody went to jail. That's a big problem with the American system. Morgan Stanley's quarterly profit is down 50%. Goldman Sachs' revenue slumps to the lowest in more than 4 years. So let's all feel sorry for the poor little money junkies. They're not getting as rich as fast as they would like. So they're probably crying here. Sagging profits, rising competition, big layoffs at Nordstrom. Another retailer is on the skids here. Another very alarming story from Rinf.com. Corporations are defaulting on their debts like it's 2008 all over again. And for those of you who are still supporting Ted Cruz, both of you, you might want to pay attention because Ted Cruz is in favor of a tax on gold and silver bullion in Cruz's simple tax code. He proposes taxing wages earned at the same time as at the same rate as investment income. This amounts to double taxation for gold investors. You have a sales tax on the bullion purchase, then a capital gains tax on any profits you make. And what they're doing here, it's not a big revenue generator. They're trying to make gold and silver less attractive in order to keep you in order to trick you into keeping your money in your savings accounts and in your stock portfolios. So Ted Cruz is definitely a Wall Street sellout. Now, as you know, over in Washington, D.C., there's been a big, huge protest over how corrupted our election system and politics have become. Apparently, hundreds have been arrested, including Ben & Jerry, of Ben & Jerry's ice cream. And they do make very good ice cream, and I do indulge in it every once in a great while. But they do take their money and they put it into some very, very positive causes. And they get on out there and they walk their talk. Story coming out of SHTFplan.com. Get ready for a viral pandemic of global unrest They warn it's coming. And this is actually originating from Lloyd's of London, the insurance company, which has a well-deserved reputation for prognosticating the future in order to mitigate risk. And Lloyd's commissioned a risk management consultancy, the Risk Advisory Group. And all the indicators are that there's going to be global unrest. And that's not a surprise. This push for a global government has created the anger, leading to a global revolt. I think it would probably be a very good thing if done peacefully. Apparently over in New Jersey, there was this college student leader, Kyla McKelvey, who was at the forefront of the Black Lives Matter and was out there getting press because black students were getting threatening messages, and it turns out she was sending them herself. She's been sentenced to 90 days in jail and says she's being forced to pay $82,000 to cover the costs of the police response to her fraud. It was all a fake. Got to take a break for news and commercials. We'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show, hour number 2. The phone lines are open, 877-300-7645. It looks like this whole European Union situation is breaking down, even setting aside all the nations who are talking about splitting. Story coming out of Investment Watch blog. European army tanks scramble to lock down the borders. Schengen is over. And I don't care what it says on the letterhead, Europe is no longer a union. For all intents and purposes, it's gone back to a bunch of separate nations guarding their borders and controlling who comes in and comes out, which is fine. That's what you should do. It's the reason for a border. Now, here in the United States, we've been hit, or the government has been hit. I just got chastised for using the imperial we too much. U.S. has been hit with an alarming 1,200% increase in unaccompanied illegal immigrant children. They're just pouring them across the border. Oh, we'll let the Norteamericanos taxpayers pay for them all. Free school, free food, free whatever. It's very alarming if you think about it. All right, let's see. Belarus Weather Watch Winter Storm Vexo. Are you kidding me? And they're looking at basically 34 locations in the Rockies and High Plains where April has turned out to be the snowiest month of the season. Breckenridge, Colorado, 26.5 inches. Casper, Wyoming, 11.6 inches. Mount Rushmore, South Dakota, 11.3 inches of snow for the month of April. And we're not over April yet. Good news for skiers. Copper Mountain is extending their ski season because of the recent snowstorm. And Conifer Ranch in Colorado basically set the record. More than 50 inches of snow over the weekend. 50 inches over the weekend. That's a lot. All at once. Now, here's where it gets really interesting and propagandistic, if you will. There was an article over in the Boston Herald, Denver International Airport back on track after snowstorm. And they're talking about the snow that hit and shut the airport down on Saturday. 850 flights had to be canceled because of the snow. And this article is all about huzzah. Huzzah, the Denver airport was back in business for Sunday. And here's where it's interesting. And I did a screen capture and I posted it to the website so you can verify this for yourself. Just above the headline about the Denver airport reopening after being shut down by snow, they have one of those little banner inserts. Earth's hot streak continues for a record 11 months. They can't even wait for the snow to finish melting to crank up the propaganda again. Oh my goodness. It's warming. It's broiling. It's all your fault. You will pay a carbon tax. Another little article out here. This is from Lehigh Valley Live. Climate change believers resort to McCarthyism. And they start right off by saying, have you noticed it used to be global warming, and then when it really wasn't warming, they changed it to climate change or climate emergency to make it sound more serious, to salvage this failing policy. And the article then goes on to say that much of the tactics that we are seeing being used against those who refuse to go along with this human-caused global warming dogma are reminiscent of the McCarthyism that took place in the 1950s, where careers were destroyed, people were wrongfully accused, they were smeared, and the full power of the government came on down against anybody who refused to go along with the agenda, whatever the agenda happened to be. Now, Bill Nye, who bills himself as the science guy, maybe we ought to call him Bill D. Nye, but I digress. His hysteria on the global warming issue has been ramping up and ramping up. Now, you need to understand, everybody who took Al Gore's money or got themselves media attention by supporting the global warming movement, now they're in trouble because they basically bet their reputations and credibility that the world was getting warmer. And as they are still continuing to prove out there in Colorado, no, it is not. And so they're trying to figure some way to salvage their reputation. Switching from global warming to climate change didn't work. We all remember this all started with screams about how the world was warming. Snowfalls are a thing of the past. And now all of these people, they're looking at the loss of their funding, the loss of their credibility, being fired from whatever their TV show happens to be, and that's why the screeching is getting higher and higher. And Bill Nye's made these extraordinary comments about how anybody who doubts human-caused global warming needs to be fined, needs to be treated like a terrorist, needs to be locked up, and today he's out there equating anybody who doubts human-caused global warming with war criminals. That's how hysterical he is getting. Now, we all know what war crimes are. Going into somebody else's country and killing a bunch of innocent people. Nobody who is there questioning the dogma of human-caused global warming is invading anybody's country or killing anybody. But Bill Nye's attitude is if we doubt what we're told, we have to be treated like we're war criminals here. Now, as you know, there has been a lot of tremendous geological activity. A lot of people are very, very concerned. There was the series of quakes in Japan, the big one down in Ecuador. A lot of people got killed there. Apparently, there's an area near the Yellowstone caldera. And about 100 years ago, it was actually known to have geothermal activity, but it kind of faded out a long, long time ago, and it's only remembered anecdotally in the history books. But apparently, the geothermal vents in this particular area are starting to open up again. So a lot of people are very concerned about that. And over in Japan, we're seeing some of this weird government talk because following the quakes very closely, the volcano Mount Aso started erupting. Now, at this point, it's a minor eruption. And the official declaration from the Japanese government is, we're really not sure the two events are related. Well, I think there's a good reason to suspect that they are. First of all, Mount Aso has been under volcano watch since last November. They labeled it as what they call level 2, which means you are forbidden to go into the crater because of the possibility something's going to happen and you're going to get killed. Now, second, Mount Aso is classed as a probable supervolcano. And what that means is the lava or the magma in the magma chamber has a high concentration of gases dissolved in it, mostly carbon dioxide. And what happens when you take a bottle of warm soda pop, which has got carbon dioxide dissolved in it, and you give it a shake? Well, Mount Aso got a good shaking from both of those quakes, and they're seeing volcanic activity. So I'd say that, yeah, the odds are it is related. And Japanese volcanologists are concerned that the eruption may continue, may grow. Here's the problem. Because of the widespread power cuts and internet cuts, the monitoring equipment that was up on the volcano is now disabled. They don't have any instruments up there. They can't access the tilt meters. They can't access the local seismographs, thermographs, all of it. They're just standing down on the ground, watching the smoke and steam come out the top and hoping for the best. And I certainly would prefer it not erupt. I don't think there's been an eruption of a supervolcano since the early 1800s. They tend to be very, very noisy. And I'd like to avoid it, but we all know it's only a matter of time before we get the next geological disaster. So, my sympathies to everybody in Japan who suffered loss or damage. Same thing with Ecuador. But it does seem like the planet is really rocking and rolling these days. We'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show, and we're going to go ahead to the phones. John in Barbados, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Aloha, Michael. Yeah, I've got a little comment about town hall news. And I wonder how long they had to search New York to find a Ted Cruz supporter.
Yeah.
I mean, that was just a piece of propaganda on voting day, wasn't it?
Of course it was. Of course it was. I mean, the entire political establishment, both parties and the establishment media, they want Trump gone. And they're still pushing Cruz, even though he is ineligible, and I think it is a real concern. The game plan is going to be to protect Ted Cruz over his natural-born issue of eligibility until after he's got the nomination and Hillary has the nomination, and then the U.S. Supreme Court is going to kick Ted Cruz out so that we will have absolutely no choice in November but Hillary Clinton.
Well, I've been investigating this a little bit, and it looks very likely that the Cruz, his parents, weren't actually married at the time.
Yeah, that's been the latest wrinkle, that Cruz's parents were in the process of divorcing their previous spouses. The final decree had not been handed down, and they hadn't actually gotten married at the time Ted Cruz was born, which happens all the time, not a big deal. But there is a specific section of the United States Immigration Naturalization Act that a child born to a U.S. citizen in another country out of wedlock does not attain birthright citizenship.
Which makes it impossible to be a natural-born citizen.
He wasn't even a citizen until 12 years after he'd been in this country. Now, that's okay for Ted Cruz to be a senator because the natural-born requirement is not put on representatives and senators, but it is an issue for the president and, by virtue of the 12th Amendment, the vice president.
And I find that this new finding about Hillary Clinton and the problem she had even being a senator, never mind.
No, she was legitimately a senator. What it was is because she presided over pay raises for the Secretary of State in her term, she was blocked by the emoluments clause from holding that office herself. But again, the government thinks they should be above the Constitution. Laws are just for you little people, just like the taxes are for you little people. We're above taxes. We're above the law. We are the new royalty.
Anyway, Michael, I'm just letting you know, I've dumped Windows. I'm now on Linux.
Good.
And this is Skype Linux, and I've got everything working beautifully now.
Well, that's good for you. I've got another friend who's dropping her Windows system and moving to a Mac, which is an improvement. And I'm going to be helping her get that all set up as well. All right, John, thank you very much. We're going to let you go here and switch over to Glenn in Pennsylvania. Aloha, Glenn. What's on your mind?
Hi, Mike. Hey, is it true that Mount Aso was named after Al Gore because of its carbon emission potential?
No, I don't think so. It's been called that for a very, very long time. But, with all this screaming about carbon dioxide, I've sort of been expecting Al Gore to show up here in Hawaii and walk up the side of Mauna Loa with a giant cork to stick in there in the crater because, those volcanoes put out much more CO2 every day than all of the world's cars. And here's where you need to be paying attention. The Atmospheric Research Station that the U.S. government relies on to measure atmospheric CO2 is situated on top of Mauna Loa. It's the next peak over from where the observatories are on Mauna Kea. But Mauna Loa is an active volcanic system. Further down that slope, you've got Kilauea Crater, Chain of Craters Road. That's where the volcano is still active. What do volcanoes put out? Carbon dioxide. So here you have the people screaming about atmospheric carbon dioxide are taking their measurements of atmospheric carbon dioxide on an active volcano putting out carbon dioxide. No wonder they're getting scary numbers.
Yeah. Wow. Well, I hope we don't see Hawaii end up like the way we saw it in that John Cusack movie. What was that, 2012 or whatever? You know that apocalyptic movie where Yellowstone went and everything went?
Well, yeah, and the whole West Coast cracked up. I don't think we're going to see that happen. The biggest threat we have, Hawaii's volcanoes are not tectonic volcanoes, they're hotspot volcanoes, or it's actually one hotspot. And they do not have the huge amount of dissolved gases in the lava, so we don't have to worry about explosive eruptions. We're classic shield volcanoes as opposed to the stratovolcanoes. The big threat we do have is that there is a large portion of the Big Island that is actually sliding just a little bit down toward the ocean. It's kind of like Cumbre Vieja over in the Atlantic. Now, it hasn't really moved in a long time, but if you look at satellite pictures, you can see this rift zone where there are noticeable cracks. And were that large chunk of land to all of a sudden get it into its mind to break off and plunge into the ocean, that would be a serious problem for everybody around the Pacific Rim.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Speaking of explosive eruptions, you talked about that Lloyd's of London thing about civil unrest worldwide. For the U.S., I would suggest one summer flashpoint for that sort of thing is going to be the RNC convention.
Yeah. Well, the police there are buying something like $20 million in riot gear, and they're going to be ready for a full-on assault.
I originally read of an allocation of $54 million, and they were supposedly bucking for another 60. So the numbers I read in an article, obviously they're going to be all over the map. But the point is, they're preparing for, and it's almost like a no-win situation because you have people making bellicose proclamations or what they're going to do if this happens or what's going to happen if that happens. So it's almost like no matter what happens, somebody's going to cause some trouble. And we have the DNC convention after that here in Philly, which in and of itself shouldn't be quite so volatile. And there might be some Bernie people protesting, but I don't think Soros is sending in mobs of busing in mobs of troublemakers.
No, he's spending all his money on the Dump Trump campaign.
I think what they're going to, I don't know, what you're saying about Cruz is possible that they may scuttle him before the election, or they may just use him to demolish the Republican Party overall, and they're thinking I think he thinks he's going to get a plum position, after this is all over. But I think the powers that be are going to kick him to the curb because he's scarily weird and they don't even like him.
Yeah, and again, he's being supported and promoted in order to keep Trump from first ballot victory at the convention.
Right, exactly. And then when he realizes how he's being used and that he's going to get the shaft, he's going to be sorely dismayed. And I'm sorry, you know what? I'm from an evangelical background. You and I have had religious disagreements from time to time. I understand your stance, but I can't see how any conscientious Christian could support him because he's just so bizarre and weird and scary. So,
yes, he is a little creepy.
Not everybody's drinking the Kool-Aid. Bye.
All right, we got to let you go. We got to take a break for commercials and sell some products, and we'll be right back. Aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here, and checking in with both Japan and Ecuador. The aftershocks are continuing. They're having a real hard time with that. And apparently last night in Mexico, the Popocatépetl volcano erupted rather seriously, hurling rocks about a mile from the crater. The ash cloud shut down the airport. So, I don't know, maybe it's planet Earth is like saying, get off me. See all that stuff. The Earth is a dynamic system. It's not solid. Never has been. Alrighty, now then, as you know, there is a big stink, or shall we say controversy, over the documentary Vaxxed, which was going to be in the Tribeca Film Festival. Robert De Niro was going to personally introduce it because he has a child that he is pretty sure was perfectly okay up until they got that massive vaccination, and the child then developed autism. And under financial pressure from backers of the Tribeca Film Festival, the film was yanked. And then De Niro went public saying that he regretted that decision, and the film should be seen. Then the Vax was going to be shown down at the Houston International Film Festival, got yanked there. apparently under direct orders from the mayor's office. Somebody is very much afraid of this. Yesterday, Aidan Quinn went public saying that he is convinced that his child's autism was caused by the vaccines. And here is where you start to see the dictatorship full on. We have a little coffee mug we sell in our store. The fastest way to bring down a dictatorship is to force them to act like one where everybody can see it. And right now, Huffington Post. Because Huffington Post had a contributor, regular contributor, Lance Simmons. Simmons has been with Huffington Post for 8 years. He's published over 200 articles. And then he wrote a review of the documentary Vaxxed. He'd seen the movie at one of the screenings, and he was impressed by it, and he said, this is a good movie, you should see it. Huffington Post yanked the article and canceled his account. Just blocked him completely. Meanwhile, apparently one of the pro-vaccine posters on Wikipedia, who's always going in and editing articles to say vaccines are good and under a pseudonym, has been identified as notorious science troll David Gorski. And remember when the global warming situation was first cranking up, they caught some of these warmistas going into Wikipedia to rewrite the articles on the Roman and medieval warming periods to say, well, they weren't really that warm and it wasn't really all that different. We know that the Roman and medieval warming periods were times of tremendous prosperity. You had food growing right outside your door. You didn't need to go out and, work hard to eat. And that left time left over for the development of art and culture and architecture and engineering. The flowering of Roman civilization happened during the Roman warm period. The Renaissance happened during the medieval warm period. These are good things, but they didn't want you to know that. So there's a lot of, Wikipedia is very good on some subjects, but they are a target of disinformation operatives. You need to remember that. And here's where it gets kind of interesting, because as you know, not too long ago, it was revealed that over at the FDA's own website, they admit vaccines cause autism, seizures, and death. They have copies of all the mandatory package inserts on the vaccines. You can read them there, or if you're having a doctor or a nurse wave a needle at you, just say, before you stick that in, I want to see the package insert. And take a magnifying glass. They're printed in microscopic type. Now, over in Japan, they have a different system. Here in the United States, you cannot sue a vaccine maker. They were indemnified by the Homeland Security Act, which sounds kind of bizarre, and all claims for vaccine damage go to the Vaccine Injury Court, which has handed out a couple of billions of dollars in damages caused by vaccines. Now, the vaccine companies don't pay for that. The taxpayer does, which sounds a little kind of screwy to me. If you want the vaccine companies to produce better vaccines, you let them pay the price of the damage. But no. The taxpayers are there to cover the losses. That's their role. Now, over in Japan, vaccine makers can and are being sued in specific Gardasil and Cervarix. The makers of these products, Merck and GlaxoSmithKline, are being hit with class action lawsuits over all the damage being caused. Now, amazingly enough, those vaccines are still legally available in Japan, but the government now informs doctors that if one of their patients asks for the vaccine, they can't offer it, they can't suggest it, but if a patient asks for the vaccine because of the intense TV commercial advertising, the doctors are required by law to say this shot can harm you. Paralysis, short-term memory loss, all kinds of permanent problems. Now, as you know, the Zika virus has been the headline grabber over the last few days. Oh, the Zika virus. Zika is the cause of that microcephalic epidemic down there in Brazil. It's horrible. We need a new vaccine. Oh, we just invented one. You must buy it now. And we pointed out, Zika has been around for 70 years at least. It's never produced microcephalic babies. And these microcephalic babies all followed a mandatory vaccination program for Brazilian mothers using a vaccine whose package insert says, yes, this can cause microcephalic babies. So we have this story coming out of Investment Watch blog where they're admitting, yeah, the microcephalic babies was not the Zika virus. Now they're saying that a Monsanto pesticide may be behind it. Whatever happened to the precautionary principle? It was always great when, the environmentalists were saying, well, we have to follow the precautionary principle and, tell you to do that. We don't know what will work, but, we're going to stop you from doing what you're doing just as a precaution. We need to be doing that with GMO food and vaccines. Let's not force it onto the public until we know it's safe. And the model today is force it on the public. We know it isn't safe. We're going to make more money treating the symptoms. Now, over in Southern California, in Aliso Canyon, there is now another leaking well at Porter Ranch. Remember that big methane spill was all over, and they're abutting one of the most toxified, contaminated areas in the entire country. It was a secret research lab. And they've had nuclear meltdowns there, all kinds of... There's no way to clean it up. It is that badly contaminated. They're just going to leave it there and fence it off and say, do not go in there. But there's now another gas leak from that same system. These are underground storage wells where they store surplus natural gas to even out supply and demand. But like everything else in our country, none of this stuff is being maintained properly because the money is all going to the bankers, to the war, to Israel. And so now, as of this last weekend, there is another leak. Now, out at Hanford, they've discovered one of their tanks holding nuclear waste is leaking, and the leak is increasing. Apparently, the radiation alarms went off yesterday. They sent in a borescope camera, and basically the tanks are supposed to be double-walled, and the inside of the tank is leaking into the space between the two walls. But we are being assured that this should not be considered as a major, major problem. We'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show. During the break, I was looking over at the We Hate Donald Trump network, and once again, they're pushing this idea that Saudi Arabia did 9/11, and apparently a lot of the establishment media is still trying to push this nonsense. And fool me once, shame on you. Fool me twice, shame on me. Or especially 3 times. Because the U.S. has blamed every nation it wants to invade for 9/11. And then afterwards they'll say, oh, golly gee, we were wrong. First it was Afghanistan, then it was Iraq. And we even have President George W. Bush on video saying, well, yeah, Iraq didn't have anything to do with 9/11. We just invaded because they could have been part of it, and they would have supported it, which they didn't either as well. Now they're pushing the Saudi issue. And they're trying to portray Saudi Arabia's attempts to defend itself against this ridiculous bill in Congress as somehow proving they have something to hide and they're guilty. Actually, it proves exactly the opposite. It proves what I've been saying all along. If Saudi Arabia wanted to hurt the United States of America, they do not need to crash airplanes into buildings. All they got to do is take their money back. And we're talking $750 billion. Yanked out of the financial system of the United States all at once would bring it crashing down. And it would be perfectly legal and moral for Saudi Arabia to do that. So if Saudi Arabia had a motive to attack the United States, that's how they'd do it. But Saudi Arabia doesn't have a motive. Saudi Arabia has grown rich off the petrodollar deal. They're making money hand over fist, not as much as they used to, but they've become incredibly rich. They've built up their entire kingdom because of the petrodollar deal. They've got their money invested in the United States. Why would anybody in Saudi Arabia want to commit an act like 9/11? Now, I'm not ruling out that Saudi Arabia's intelligence agencies were working together with the U.S. government and the Mossad on this, but the media spin is that somehow Saudi Arabia is the villain behind 9/11. And this time we know we're right. Yes, we told you Afghanistan did 9/11. Then we told you Iraq did 9/11. But this time you can believe us when we tell you it's the Saudis. No, it isn't. It wasn't Saudis who were arrested for cheering and dancing as the World Trade Towers came crashing down. And I can imagine the Saudi Arabian government is justifiably concerned to find themselves now in the crosshairs of the U.S. military after so many years of supporting the U.S. agenda in the Middle East. Now then, apparently there's already an audit being ordered in New York. This is coming out of Patriot Rising. Comptroller Scott Stringer is launching an audit of the city's Board of Elections after reports of problems in today's primary. And apparently more than 100,000 voters disappeared from the voting rolls in Brooklyn alone. His comment is, we're in danger of Americans losing confidence in the election system. I think we're already past that point. We're past that point completely. Now, as you know, down in Flint, Michigan, all of those people who discovered they have been feeding or toxic contaminated water to their families, either to drink or included in the food, even washed in it. And they're very, very angry about that. So they started a federal class action lawsuit seeking $150 million in restitution and replacement of the water lines in every Flint home. It just got thrown out of court by U.S. District Judge John Corbett O'Meara, who said, really, this is something for the Environmental Protection Agency to be looking at. They're already passing the buck back and forth. Oh, no, they'll do that. Oh, no, they'll do it. They're going to run it in circles. But just to remind you all that the Flint drinking water isn't all that bad, the governor of Michigan has promised he will drink Flint water for 30 days. Of course, he's going to go ahead and filter it first. And let's be honest, this is about as honest as when Obama went down to the Gulf of Mexico and went swimming in water that was really kind of sort of close to the Gulf of Mexico, but it wasn't actually in it. He was in a pool. And ate a fish taco that they assured us the fish had come from the Gulf of Mexico. That's what it is. See, I'm drinking this water. You can believe me, it's from Flint, Michigan. They're not interested in making things better. They just want it to look better, so you will shut the heck up. Now, here's a bizarre story. You're all familiar with the Church of the Flying Spaghetti Monster. And it did start as a parody, I will grant that. But then a lot of churches start for some very silly reasons. I mean, Scientology, which is now legally recognized as a religion, and they get the tax deduction for it, actually began as a bet between two science fiction writers, Robert Heinlein and L. Ron Hubbard. And L. Ron Hubbard bet Heinlein that he could get rich just making up a brand new religion, and boy, did he. Just amazing stuff. But that's how Scientology began. And it's still considered legally religion. Now, there are churches of the Flying Spaghetti Monster where weddings are being conducted. But that didn't stop the U.S. District Court of Nebraska from denying a prisoner's right to practice Pastafarianism by declaring that the Church of the Flying Spaghetti Monster is not a religion. It's not a god. The Flying Spaghetti Monster is not a god. Well, I understand where the judge is coming from, but he just violated the First Amendment because the government is not supposed to show respect to any one religion over another. And the judge misstepped. Absolutely, absolutely misstepped. Alrighty, looking at some of the headlines coming on in here right now. Article coming out of Investment Watch blog. Good example of what all Americans should be doing: protesting, screaming, demanding. And again, I urge nonviolence. But it's time for you to go ahead and just allow yourself to be angry at what you're seeing here. It's just amazing. Let's see. New Yorkers are trying to get the voters out for Trump, so they can tell Ted Cruz to shut the heck up here. Dr. Judy Mikovits is out there saying, we are carrying potentially deadly retroviruses we acquired through vaccination. This is one of the weird things about vaccines. We're being told they're supposed to make us better. Now we're finding out we get live pathogens that can revert to full potency. There was the Canadian study about last year's flu shot. Not only was not effective at preventing the flu, but actually appeared to spread the disease. And, of course, the pharmaceutical companies love that. The more people who get sick, the more they can go on the media and say, oh, there's a mumps epidemic. Everybody needs the vaccination. And then you find out that everybody who came down with mumps in that epidemic had the vaccine. It's all driven by the money. And now we've got this issue of the negalase, which blocks the body's own healing system, is found in vaccines, and there doesn't seem to be a legitimate reason for it to be there in the first place. It's just one of the things that's in there. And you don't really know what's in there. I don't think at this stage of the game that we should absolutely trust that we're being told what's in those vaccines. In many cases, the formula is patented and classified, and you don't know what's in there. We know that autism has exploded ever since the vaccines became mandatory. We know that peanut anaphylaxis has exploded in the population ever since they started using peanut oil as a vaccine adjuvant. You're supposed to eat peanuts, not inject them into your bloodstream. There's all kinds of problems that have emerged during this push to get everybody to have 30 or 40 very expensive shots, even though they're perfectly healthy. It's operating on the same moral level as the traveling Wild West medicine show salesman. Scare them, then sell them something that's completely worthless, potentially harmful. Take your money and ski-daddle. Now, the idea that there might be retroviruses in those vaccinations, that is scary. For those of you who don't understand, retroviruses are the ones like HIV, and they're very unstable, and they mutate, and they can cause all kinds of problems here. Okay. Apparently, Mayor Rahm Emanuel up in Chicago is floating a proposal for a George Lucas museum that will require 5 tax hikes and more than $1 billion in borrowing. Frankly, as much as I admire George, I think he could pay for his own museum. We'll be back after the news and commercials. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show, hour number 3. And joining us on the phone right now is Daniel McGowan, and Eileen Flemings. I hope I pronounced those correctly. And thank you for spending some time with us today. Okay, now, the reason I wanted to have you on the show is you were involved with the putting up of a billboard that stated a known historical fact that Israel attacked the USS Liberty, killed a bunch of sailors, wounded a bunch more, but the billboard got taken down. Why don't you tell us the story behind all of this?
Well, basically, it's 2 billboards that have now been taken, and the 2 companies that have initially put the billboards up was Lamar, and the most recent was Outfront Media. And the billboard, all it said was help the USS Liberty survivors attacked by Israel, and then honorlibertyvets.org, which is the and I was not the one that did that. Let me get that straight. I'm just reporting on this, and yes, I am a friend of the Liberty survivors, and I have donated for billboards, definitely. But what has happened is the great thing is the most recent one was up for 2 weeks. However, it came down after some Zionist partisans complained to Outfront Media they were going to take their business elsewhere. So the billboard came down. The total 4-week pay, which would have been $2,500 or $2,400, is being reimbursed. That's all coming back. But the reason for the full reimbursement is the photographer that was supposed to take the proof of purchase photograph didn't get around to doing it before the billboard came down. So the billboard company cannot even prove that they actually did put that billboard up, but we know they did because there were complaints came. So the billboard came down. A lot of backlash has happened because it's publicized the Outfront Media's contact information. Lots of people have called, put a lot of pressure. I made at least 4 calls and sent snail mail, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. They're not going to probably ever respond to us. However, the money has been refunded, and the 501(c)(3), who takes care of the money stuff, that is Council for the National Interest. That is when people donate at the honorlibertyvets.org website. They themselves are not the 501(c)(3). It's the Council for National Interest. They take care of the money. And we've started a new campaign. The great news is we've got one billboard already has been donated to put up in Orlando, and the company is Clear Channel. And they have a big presence in Orlando. And what I'm hoping is your audience can help me target if there are any Navy bases, where the Navy bases are. There used to be a big one in Orlando, but that has since gone. So we're trying to target these billboards close to where the Navy bases are or have been. So if they can help me on that, and if anybody, and I hope everybody does, even a few dollars, whatever you can donate to the honorlibertyvets.org website. You can sign the little statement to get on the list, to show your support. You get a free bumper sticker, and make a donation. And there, if you play around here, you can see the two billboards that have gone up so far. But more is coming up, but just not Lamar or Outfront Media. It's Clear Channel now. And we're going to do a little bit different campaign this time. I'm not going to give too much information because we want to make it so that nobody can complain about anything. This is all about supporting the liberty. The veterans we're facing coming up now, their 50th anniversary next year, and we want to establish every June 8th to be known as USS Liberty Remembrance Day, and it's up to we the people to do this because we know our government's not going to do it.
Well, that's certainly. I mean, if you look at it, it's a weird situation. The Monitor was lost at sea due to unseaworthy design, honored and remembered. You had Pearl Harbor, the Arizona, sunk by a surprise attack, honored and remembered. The Scorpion, destroyed by a torpedo battery, honored and remembered. The Thresher, destroyed by cheap welding, honored and remembered. You have the USS Liberty, which successfully repelled a sneak attack by Israel and was scrapped and forgotten. Now, the point I want to make here...
not forgotten. Not forgotten. Never forgotten.
Okay. All right, I stand corrected, but I mean in terms of the point of view of the U.S. government, they don't...
They want it forgotten.
Yeah, they want it forgotten.
Yes.
But here's the point I make. We honor and remember the ships that were lost and destroyed, and here we have a ship that survived a sneak attack, and they want it to go away. And that's the point I was trying to make, is the absurdity. Now, it looks to me like despite the refund, you have a valid breach of contract lawsuit that you could bring against the billboard company.
Yes, we do. Yes, we do. But I'm leaving that up to the powers to be at Council for National Interest. They can handle all that legal stuff. I'm a reporter and an activist, and but I definitely agree. I definitely agree. There is a situation there, but I don't know. I'm not privy to all that stuff. But I do know that we've got a new campaign started here, and Orlando will be the first billboard, and we want to get as many billboards blanketed across this nation, drawing attention to this June 8th as another USS Liberty Remembrance Day. And here's another thing that is never going to go away. You know how a big part of it, the situation is that everybody's gets up in arms because Israel did this attacking, okay? Well, and our government won't come out and fully admit this. We know this, but they have. And the article, I just put it out today, it's Silver Star Medal Citation admits Israel attack on USS Liberty. And it's anybody who's interested, I can send you, they want to contact me, a better photo of this, the JPEG. You can print it out and read it. But it was the Silver Star Medal that was awarded to Terry Haldane. Bardiar. I'm sorry if I mispronounced, but at the time of the attack, he was 23 years old, and he is the one who risked his life atop of the Liberty's napalm glazed deck to jury rig an antenna. He got the SOS off to the Sixth Fleet after the warplanes and torpedo boats had already killed 34 and wounded 174 of his brothers. And the Silver Star, I'm reading it to you. The President of the United States takes pleasure in presenting the Silver Star Medal to Electronic Technician 3rd Class James T. Halbardariar, United States Navy, for services that set forth in the following: for conspicuous gallantry and intrepid. Oh man, I
intrepidity.
can't say. Thank you. But basically, the bottom line, it says the USS Liberty was attacked by Israeli aircraft and motor torpedo boats in the East Mediterranean Sea. There's 10 or 11 other Silver Star Medal citations issued. None of them state that. There's a lot of other awards that the Liberty veterans have received, but none of them state that simple fact that it is out there that are...
Well, you know, when the captain of the Liberty got a Congressional Medal of Honor was the only time the medal was not awarded at the White House. I mean, they literally went to the Navy Yard and said, here's your medal, go away and shut the heck up. Here is the point. We're almost to the commercial break. Here is the point. The fact that Israel attacked the Liberty is an established historic fact. And that's all the billboard is saying. It's not making any other allegations, and yet Israel's supporters seem to feel that reporting on the real history of Israel is somehow anti-Semitism and Jew hate. We've got to take a 4-minute break for commercials. We're going to come on back with Daniel McGowan. I hope we're going to hear from him a little bit more, and Eileen Flemings about supporting the USS Liberty and the billboards. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. We're talking with Daniel McGowan and Eileen Flemings about the USS Liberty billboard. And it is important to understand the billboard did not say anything that is not factually accurate. And yet Israel's supporters said, oh, you can't put that up there. You can't put it up there. I have a few comments to make, and then I'd like to give Daniel a chance to share the microphone here a little bit. First of all, I will confess, based on my prior knowledge of them, I'm very surprised Clear Channel is going along with these billboards, but you know, hopefully it's all going to work out really well.
As I said, we have a new campaign. It's a whole new campaign.
Okay.
So that's what I'm saying. There's new stuff coming here that we're trying a different way. So there's nothing that they can complain about. And yes, I do, and I wanted to, if I can, please just get back to the point I was trying to make about Terry's citation, because it was signed for the President of the United States by the Secretary of the Navy, and we have all these people in Congress who will not admit or do not know, and here it is in black and white from the President of the United States that the USS Liberty was attacked by Israeli aircraft. So it's not just these historical facts. It is now on the record here, black and white, on the citation to present to Congress people. So that's why I'm hoping people will please contact me. I'm happy to send them the JPEG, and they can print out the citation and highlight it and confront their Congress people. And if you're going to all these rallies to elect a presidential campaign or any candidate, the question they all need to be asked is, do you support establishing every June 8th to be known as USS Liberty Remembrance Day? That's the question. That, to me, that's the acid question they need to be asked.
Okay, now obviously, I'm going to support that idea. We've had many of the Liberty survivors on my radio show. If you'll send me a copy of that JPEG, I'll be glad to give it a permanent home here. Now, what I suggested to my listeners when this story about Outfront Media first broke, as you say, you can complain and whine and cry to Outfront. You're probably not going to get a response. I worked in advertising for a lot of years, and I'll tell you what's going to work. What you do is you look around and you look at Outfront billboards, and then you look at who is advertising on them, and you contact them and say that you are refusing to buy their products or services because they're advertising with Outfront Media, which turned its back on American sailors. And believe me, that will get right up to the very top of Outfront Media, and they'll be very worried about that. So that's Yeah.
People do that. I definitely do. That's a great idea.
Yes, that's how you will get to them. All right.
I think we've gotten to them, but they haven't responded.
Well, they'll respond to this. They'll be in a panic on this one. If word of a...
Right, when they start losing business, exactly.
Right.
That's why they down. They were threatened with losing a customer.
Yeah, but you see, what we can do is threaten them with a loss of much more business for having caved into that one customer. All right, let's give Daniel McGowan a chance. He's been very quiet and very patient here. For all we know, he was kidnapped by space aliens while we were waiting here. Daniel, you there? Daniel, are you there?
Oh, no.
I can barely hear you. I don't know if we've got a bad patch cable or something. Tom, if you could verify his connection here, because I certainly could not hear him at all. Okay, all right, well, we're having technical issues again. So basically what we're looking at here, we know that Israel's servants in the United States of America do routinely take the attitude that nothing Israel does should ever be reported on. And they constantly accuse websites that talk about the USS Liberty or the If Americans Knew website that, oh, you're being anti-Semitic, you want Hitler to come back, you hate the Jewish people. But all these websites are simply reporting on established historical facts. But Israel survives with deception. I mean, look at the motto of the Mossad. By way of deception, thou shalt do war. Okay, and Daniel?
I'm here now, Mike.
All right, Daniel. All right, your turn. Start talking.
Yeah, Mike, I'm here in Geneva, New York. I'm part of an organization called Deir Yassin Remembered.
Yes.
It's an organization of Jews and non-Jews working to promote one state in Israel, Palestine. But to tie into your liberty discussion, in Rochester, New York, we have a memorial in the Rochester Harbor on Lake Ontario to the crew of the USS Liberty. And it mentions the 34 that were killed in action and the 174 that were wounded, 208 Purple Hearts, the most decorations awarded for any single ship action in U.S. history. But what's very interesting about this memorial is that nowhere on it is Israel mentioned. It is as though they were attacked by aliens or by Russians or by somebody else. Israel was not allowed to be on that memorial. And if it had been, if the people that put the memorial up had insisted on saying that Israel was the one that attacked the USS Liberty, it would not have been allowed in Rochester. Senator Schumer and others of his ilk would have squashed it. And as it turned out, the memorial is a testament to Jewish power, the power that Jews hold to prevent the truth from being told, even something as simple as it was Israel that attacked the USS Liberty.
Well,
now,
the good news is
our
because
organization has also put up a billboard in Detroit, and it's also with Lamar. It's a very simple message. It says, America first, not Israel. Now, America first is Donald Trump's slogan. America first is something that most Americans can certainly identify with. But the second two words, not Israel, is somehow seen as anti-Semitic, Jew-hating, it's hate-mongering, vomiting discontent with our ally in the Middle East, with the only democracy, and blah, blah, blah. 4 words, America first, not Israel, and Lamar took that billboard down. And they will not allow us, regardless of the cost, and by the way, it cost us almost $10,000 to put that billboard up. Regardless of the cost, Lamar will not print that billboard in Detroit or in New York or in New Jersey or anywhere else in the United States.
Oh, boy.
And why is that?
Because,
the answer is Jewish power.
Yeah, but the good news is the Jewish power is definitely on the wane. More about that after this 4-minute break for commercials. Aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here. And during the break, I went out on a web search for the stories about the billboard, and the very first one I hit was from the ABC affiliate in Detroit, WXYZ. And I want to read this to you because you're going to see a very sly piece of propaganda in here. The story starts, a new billboard in Detroit is causing a lot of controversy. It reads, America first over Israel. That's not what the billboard says. But by changing the word from not to over, they're trying to spin this as somehow being an assault on Israel. And it's typical of the slimy reporting that we do get on these issues. And again, there is no question Israel attacked the USS Liberty. Israel finally got around to officially admitting it. They even paid compensation to some of the victims. They still maintain it was an accident, even though some of the pilots that were involved in the attack said they were telling their chain of command, this is an American ship, and they were told, fire on it anyway, sink it, no survivors. So it's very intense, and I put up a bunch of these stories here. But just seeing how ABC went out there and tried to change the wording on the billboard to make it look like it's more of an attack on Israel. And even those that reported honestly on the content of the billboard, they're coming across like, well, of course you should put Israel above the United States, even though you're living in the United States of America. Well, I have a message for you. If you want to put Israel above the United States of America, kindly move there. And I'm going to add a little postscript, and that is that as long as we have one homeless American in the streets of our nation, the government has no business sending a penny of your money to any other government, especially Israel. And I'd like to remind everybody that under the Symington Amendment to the Foreign Appropriations Act and the Glenn Act, the U.S. government sending money to Israel is a crime. It's illegal. They're stealing from you and giving it to Israel, and it is a crime under U.S. law. Anyway, Daniel, let's give you another shot at the microphone.
Well, we are trying to put up other billboards. One of the other messages that we have in mind, and actually it's a billboard that Lamar has already put up, is a call to boycott Israel until Palestinians have equal rights.
Mm-hmm.
In the United States, we're supposed to believe in a country with equal rights and equal rights of citizenship, and yet we support an apartheid regime in Israel that routinely discriminates against over half of the population. Most Americans don't realize that over half of the people living within the borders controlled by Israel aren't Jews. Over half of that population. The common statistic that we hear is that 20% of Israelis are Arabs. Well, that's true, but it completely ignores the fact that in the occupied territories of the West Bank and Gaza, Golan Heights, those people aren't even counted. And if you count those people, the people living within the borders controlled by Israel, over half the population isn't Jewish. So the whole concept of Zionism, of building a Jewish state, has failed. What we have today is a state controlled by Jews, but it's certainly not a Jewish state when over half of the population is Jewish. And that's a fact that most American politicians routinely ignore. And in fact, it's even worse than that when you see the politicians going to AIPAC and genuflecting and agreeing to every little thing that the Israeli lobby wants, except Bernie Sanders. And I will be voting for Bernie Sanders because he's the only one that didn't go to AIPAC and bend down on his knees.
And of course, in that last debate with Hillary, he came on out and he said there has to be respect for the Palestinians if there's going to be any progress. And even today, Joe Biden,
which they're talking about in Israel. In Israel, they have a much more open conversation than in this country. In this country, if you say something like we should have equal rights of citizenship for Palestinians, you're immediately branded as anti-Semitic. Your colleagues in the universities do not agree to your free speech, not support your right of free speech, but demonize you. and tried to get rid of you. Stephen Salita is one example, but there are many, many more. The power, the Zionist power and Jewish power is really something that is insidious in the United States. And it's very interesting because you can talk about white power, you can talk about black power, you can talk about Hispanic power, but you may not talk about Jewish power. And that's the quintessential exhibition of the power that you cannot even talk about.
Well, remember what Voltaire said, to find out who really rules over you, find out who you're not allowed to criticize. And but the good news is, that kind of clandestine power and influence that Israel uses on the U.S. only works when it remains concealed from public view. And now it is becoming visible. And even Joe Biden came on out, I think it was yesterday, saying that Israel is leading itself and the United States down the wrong path. And that, to me, suggests that Israel's little iron grip on the throat of our nation is beginning to slip.
I hope so, but I don't see it.
Well, okay. Eileen, you had a comment.
Okay, my grandfather was a German Jew who died before I could ever learn how many of my relatives may have been gassed or fried, so I'm high alert on this anti-Semitism canard, and we've got to understand and clarify a Semite is just as much an Arab as a Hebrew, so the canard is useless. The ideology of Zionism, that's our problem, and the brutal occupation of an indigenous Palestinian, that's our problem. It's not the Jews. It's Zionism. It's the ideology of Zionism, which is the sister's brother to it is American exceptionalism. It's this idea that any race or people, religion is superior to any other. We're all made equal in God's eyes. And, Thomas Paine, he said, the world is my country and to do good is my religion. And that was the spirit, when this nation was formulated. They weren't Christians and they certainly weren't Zionists. And it's up to us to reframe this issue rather than keep going in circles about this bash, and putting up signs that are going to take down. So I'm pleading with everybody to honor these USS Liberty veterans by clicking on honorlibertyvets.org, make a donation. Let's get more billboards up there, but let's get it to where they can take it down. And the goal here is to establish every June 8th to be USS Liberty Remembrance Day. It may not become a national holiday, but it can become a holiday in the spirit of our nation, in our hearts, in our towns, in our cities. We the people, yes we can. We can do it. HonorLibertyVets.org. Thank you.
All right, well, I did put a link from WhatReallyHappened.com to your webpage so people can find it very, very easily and go on over and visit that. Our policy here at our show and our website is to always have what we call the BBL, the big black line between those who are responsible for actions and gross generalizations. And so when we talk about Israel's actions, we're talking about Israel's government, and we don't collectively blame all the world's Jews for the actions of this small group of people in Tel Aviv. We're not blaming all the world's Muslims for ISIS, whoever they turn out to be. We're not blaming all Americans for the crimes of Washington, D.C. And as long as we keep that going, the anti-Semitism Jew hate label isn't going to stick, because we're talking not about ethnicity or religion, we're talking about behavior. Got to take a 4-minute break. We'll be back with the last segment of our program after these few words. Aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. Last segment of our program today. We're talking with Daniel McGowan and Eileen Flemings about these billboards that were put up to try and bring public awareness to the survivors of the USS Liberty. Israel's minions in the nation demanded they be taken down because talking the truth about Israel's history and past, that's Jew hatred and that's anti-Semitism, and nobody would care about the USS Liberty if it wasn't Israel that had shot at them. And it's a great deal of nonsense. And like I've said many, many times, this idea of Israel deflecting criticism for its actions by screaming anti-Semitism really makes as much sense as trying to deflect criticism of the Nazis by screaming, "You just hate the German people." And in that other context, you realize just how silly it is. But because Israel has such influence over our establishment media, they'll come on out and say, yes, criticizing Israel, it's only because you hate the Jews, and the media will say, yes, absolutely, you should never question that. And so we all get sucked into this Alice through the looking glass world, where, you know, we're supposed to have freedom of speech, we're free to criticize our government, we're free to criticize the British government, we're free to criticize the government of France, but we can't criticize the government of Israel. Why? Isn't that what the First Amendment is there for? So we got about 9 minutes left, and let's split it up here. And Daniel, we're going to give you about 4 minutes, and then we'll give Eileen 4 minutes.
It's interesting, Mike, that in our organization, there you seen remembered, we are half Jews and half non-Jews. All of the billboards that we've put up have been put up by Jews on our board. Jews have gone to Lamar and requested the billboards America First, not Israel, be put up. Some of the people that we have talked to at Lamar and other big billboard companies have also been Jewish, and they understand our position, and they understand the apartheid situation that we are supporting in Israel. It's not a question of us versus them. It's Jews that are really righteous Jews, Jews that are willing to take a stand against what is wrong with Israel and why our country genuflects and supports it. Jews who are appalled by the fact that 28 standing ovations were given by our Congress to Netanyahu when he came last spring. They're not comfortable with this. They're embarrassed by this. But this is the type of power that controls our Congress. And with that kind of power, it's no wonder that you can't put up a billboard, even if the message is totally correct and spot on.
Well, truth is no defense. I remember when Ernst Zundel was being prosecuted for his research, and the judge in his case literally said, I don't care if what you're telling me is the absolute truth. It's still a crime for you to say it. And they locked him up.
For 7 years.
Yes. Okay, well, is Eileen, are you still there?
Yes, I am.
Okay, got anything you want to add to the mix?
Well, we're talking freedom of speech, and this is my driving issue. And just to alert, a news tip here, 21 of April marks the 12th year since Israel's nuclear whistleblower Mordecai Vanunu walked out from 18 years behind bars. And Israel's Supreme Court is to finally rule on his 8th petition to end all the human rights restrictions that have kept him captive in Israel. And that's a whole nother story, but there could be some good breaking news coming Thursday or even tomorrow for Vanunu. He could finally be allowed free, and that will have to be the end of U.S. collusion in Israel's nuclear deceptions. And I have always said that, and the occupation of Palestine. This is what is drumming the beat for terrorism is U.S. policies. This is what endangers this homeland more than anything, I feel, and that's why I ran for U.S. House of Representatives in 2012 on a platform to establish every June 8th as USS Liberty Remembrance Day and to end federal regulations on cannabis. Here in Orlando, I'm not in Orlando, but I'm close to it. The mayor here is voting to decriminalize less than 20 grams. So things are changing that never, I would imagine, would have changed here in Orlando. So the mayor of Orlando is going to be the first mayor I'm going to petition to sign on to establishing every June 8th to be known as USS Liberty Remembrance Day. And I encourage everybody to ask their congresspeople, and if they go to any of these, anywhere, any political meeting, that's the question. Do you support the establishment of every June 8th to be USS Liberty Remembrance Day, and they don't know about it or want to know more? HonorLibertyVets.org, and thank you very much.
Well, you're welcome. They're talking about decriminalization of drugs out here in Hawaii, which hopefully will boost our tourism economy, which has been absolutely devastated by TSA abuses here. All right, so we got about 5 minutes left here, and I'm going to yak a little bit. We all know about the USS Liberty. We know about the deceptions. I think at this particular point in history, most Americans now understand and accept the government and the corporate media will lie to us about a lot of things. I think the watershed moment was the realization that no, in point of fact, Saddam Hussein did not have nuclear weapons. And prudence demands that we go back and we look at everything we've ever been told to motivate us in a certain direction. Again, the deception on the USS Liberty that we had McNamara and President Johnson literally ordering threats to the crew of the Liberty not to talk about what happened at all. And just keep it covered up. And now we've come to understand that's the standard mode of business. But I think Americans are getting very, very tired of this ritual that all of our candidates go through where they'll announce they're running for Congress or the White House, and what's the first thing they do? They fly on over to Israel and they touch that old Roman fort ruin and they get their picture taken. And it is humiliating. Eileen, you were talking about, that was Daniel was talking about how a lot of people in Israel are humiliated by the performance of the U.S. Congress to Netanyahu's speech. It's humiliating for us to see our Congress that is supposed to represent this country just very obviously slavishly devoted to a foreign ruler. It makes Washington, D.C. look like it's a Vichy government. And the French didn't like the Vichy government. There's no reason for Americans to like an occupation government or puppet rulers. I mean, look at all the countries the U.S. has tried to impose puppet rule on, how they're fighting back against their foreign puppet rulers. I think it's time for Americans to stand up in defiance to our foreign-controlled puppet rulers. And we're seeing that already in a lot of the primary contests that, being a friend of Israel isn't the vote getter in the campaigns it used to be. And I'm hoping that come November, we're going to see a lot of Israel's staunchest supporters in the government get their pink slips from the voters. And yes, I know we have massive election fraud in this country, but remember, election fraud can only swing a contest a few percentage points. If they reverse a landslide, everybody knows what happened. And we're already seeing all these people across America who are furious at discovering that their votes are being ignored, stolen, hijacked, swapped, and it's building anger across America, because if we're not voting in the government, then they don't have our consent to rule us. And we are under no obligation to obey them, pay their bills, or sacrifice life and limb of our children in their endless wars of conquest across the world. One more time, Eileen, give us the website for the USS Liberty veterans.
HonorLibertyVets.org.
HonorLibertyVets.org, and there's a bunch of sites. I'm already getting emails from people sending in photos of other billboards that are being put up and then taken down over this issue. So there is a growing public awareness of what's going on. So Daniel and Eileen, thank you very much for spending time with us today, and we're going to let you go right now. We've got about a minute left in the program. So we'll be talking about, when we come on back tomorrow, we got a bunch of stuff to cover. The Lady Claire is going to be with us on Friday, of course, and heading into the weekend. Now, we are just about 2 hours away from the closing of the polls in New York, and we're going to see what's happening. Again, we are getting stories and emails and reports from all over New York State of just in-your-face election fraud, people being not allowed to vote, polling places locked and nobody can find the keys. I mean, it is that obvious what's going down. There's the music. Time for me to get out of here and get something useful done with the rest of the day. We'll be back tomorrow here on the Genesis Communication Network. So until then, aloha, America.